Welcome everyone to part two of our session, the gig economy and project management. Part two is, what is freelancing? We'll go over exactly what the term independent worker means, as well as the differences between the gig economy and a new term called the talent economy. We'll also discuss worker classifications and top benefits of freelancing, both for the worker and the hiring organization. What is freelancing? Freelancing is a work arrangement in which the worker and the hiring organization have no fixed obligation to each other beyond the current project. A few interchangeable terms include independent contractor, independent consultant, gig worker, knowledge worker, and 1099 worker. And we'll discuss 1099 in a couple of slides. When you freelance, the hiring org is often called a client. The freelancer is free to work with multiple clients simultaneously, and the freelancer may work in a strategic or a tactical role. For example, within our project management profession, someone may serve as a PMO advisor, more in a strategic role, working with C-suite leadership. Or a PM may serve in a tactical role, such as an IT project manager working to implement an ERP solution. A freelancer controls when they work, where they work, and how they work. And control is important when we're looking at some of the legislation concerning freelancers, such as AB5 here in California. The current state of freelancing in the US is quite positive in that there are more workers moving from a corporate career into independent consulting. In 2020, 36% of the US workforce engaged in freelance work. 75% of freelancers who left an employer earn the same or more income. Freelancers contributed $1.2 trillion to the US economy in annual earnings. That was in 2020, and that was an increase of 22% over 2019. By 2023, more than half of the US workforce will be freelance workers, and this is from MBO Partners. 70% of the global workforce would like to become an independent worker. Are you part of that 70%? Would you like to become, if you are not already, an independent worker? This slide highlights the growth of freelancing in the United States. So you'll see here from Statista that in 2017, roughly 57.3 million Americans were engaged in freelancing, and that is steadily increasing and will be close to 90% per their projections in 2028. I wanted to talk a little bit about the gig economy and what Michael Kearns and John Younger describe in their article as the talent economy, because oftentimes we as professional project managers don't see ourselves or relate to the gig economy. And so I wanted to highlight some key differences between that term and the talent economy. In the gig economy, so if we're thinking Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, the platform is the differentiator and the talent is the enabler. Work in these types of platforms is commoditized. What does that mean? That means that if I am going to use an Uber driver to drive me to the airport, I probably don't care very much if my Uber driver is Sally or Paul or Kim or Joe. As long as I am picked up on time and taken to the airport at the time that I need to be there, then I'm satisfied. The work to drive me to the airport is commoditized. Whereas if you take a look at the talent economy, at some of the talent platforms, If I'm looking for someone to partner with to help me define a new PMO, for instance, I absolutely care whether it's Bill or Joe or Bob, right? Because that skill set is so specialized. So the work is not commoditized, it's actually differentiated, where you are seeking highly skilled workers. In the gig economy, the downward wage pressure is high because the work is commoditized. So the more people you have doing the work, the lower the wage. Whereas in the talent economy, because the worker skill set is so differentiated, the skill gaps are high. Henceforth, you don't have that downward wage pressure. In the gig economy, the talent is commoditized. The work is commoditized and the talent is commoditized. Whereas in the talent economy, the worker is the central value point because they're highly differentiated. In the gig economy, the platform controls the talent's experience. And so if you take a look at the Uber platform and their algorithm, it's highly controlled by the platform and the data and the algorithm. Whereas in the talent economy, the talent controls their own experience because they opt in as to whether they wish to work with a certain hiring organization. And then the final factor is that within the gig economy, and this is where the controversy comes in, there's limited growth potential for the individual. For the talent economy, there's high growth potential for the individual because they maintain control over their experience. Within the talent economy, the worker is often referred to as a knowledge worker because they have specific knowledge, whether that knowledge is around how to define a PMO or agile transformation or ERP implementation. It's highly specific. They're also referred to as the white collar gig economy in a Maven Link article. Harvard Business Review has referred to this sector of worker as super temps. We're going to now move into discussing worker classification because as we speak with project managers interested in transitioning to freelancing or independent consulting, they often have questions around worker classification. This slide is divided into two parts, and I wanted to emphasize this red line going down the middle because on the right side in light blue is the traditional employment or the employed worker. And this is where I sat for nearly 2 decades. I worked for a company. At the end of the year, I received a W-2 with my wages. The company would take out taxes such as Medicare taxes, and I would pay taxes in April. And that was my life for a number of years. And that may be what you do today working for an employer. Now, this includes working for instance, Google or PayPal, Tesla, a big company, but it also includes working for a staffing agency or a consulting firm. So in this scenario with the traditional employment setup, Google is your employer of record. When you are working on a contract for a staffing agency such as Tech Systems or Insight Global, you are a W-2 employee to that staffing firm. And therefore, they are your employer of record. So, from a taxation perspective, it works the same as if you're working for Google or PayPal. This is also applicable if you are a consultant in a consulting firm. The consulting firm is your employer of record, and they will file your W-2. They will take out the needed taxes, Medicare taxes, and other taxes that are required. and you will pay your taxes in April. And so all of these scenarios are the employed worker or employee employer relationship, the full-time permanent role. On the left side of this matrix, we have the self-employed worker. And the two terms that are most confusing are contractor and consultant. And the reason they're most confusing is that you can be an independent consultant or a consultant in a consulting firm. As we discussed, if you're a consultant in a consulting firm, you are a W-2 worker. You are an employed worker. You have an employee relationship with the consulting firm. If you're an independent consultant, however, you are self-employed. You control your own schedule. The clients belong to you. In a consulting firm, the client relationship and the clients are owned by the firm, not by you as the individual. So this is the key difference. And of course, taxation is also a major difference in that when you're an independent consultant and self-employed, you are responsible for paying your taxes. And I definitely would consult with a tax advisor because there are specific deadlines that you must meet in order to stay in compliance. The other term that can be confusing is contractor. And it is confusing for the same reason because you can be an independent contractor or a contractor for a staffing agency. If you're working for a staffing agency, you receive a W-2 and the staffing agency is your employer of record. If you're an independent contractor, you are self-employed, and it is the same as an independent consultant or freelancer in that you're responsible for self-employment taxes as well as your benefits. And so freelancers do not receive medical benefits. And so this is a huge consideration if you're looking to transition, something to think about. How are you going to cover your medical benefits? Perhaps you have a spouse and they have medical benefits, or perhaps you can look into programs and services for your medical benefits. But the top three differentiators include one, control. In the scenario where you're self-employed, you're your own boss versus reporting into an employer. Two, it's client ownership. When you're self-employed, you own the clients, you own your own business development. Whereas when you are reporting into an employer, whether they're a consulting firm or contracting company or a traditional employee, the client relationship is owned by your employer. And the third we've touched upon is taxation. Taxation works differently, and we advise that you seek advice before you get into any trouble with your taxes. This next slide highlights the top benefits of freelancing, both for the independent worker or the project professional, as well as the hiring organization. For the independent worker, the autonomy in client and project selection and the idea that you can be your own boss is the number one reason why people elect to move into independent work. You're also able to expand your skills and grow professionally through more varied clients, industries, and projects. So you're constantly learning based on the client opportunities that you're working through. And so there's a greater opportunity to quickly add more tools to your toolkit as you're working with a myriad of clients on a myriad of projects. You can also reduce your unemployment risk in that you are working with multiple clients versus you are an employee of one employer. And so if that employer has a reduction in workforce, then you are at unemployment risk. Whereas if you're an independent worker with multiple clients and you lose a client, you still have your remaining clients and it's within your control. And then the final item is that you can earn more annually versus full-time employment. You have more control of that because you're able to negotiate your hourly rate or your fixed fee. For the hiring organization, it's also positive because they can experience increased agility. They're able to hire only when they need specific resources. So they're able to flex their hiring. There's also a cost savings realized because they are not responsible for the healthcare and the bonuses and some of the taxes that we talked about that are required for full-time employees. They are able to fill their need for short-term project-based work. They're able to work with the resource before offering full-time employment. And this is key because with project management, it's difficult to gauge whether or not someone is going to be successful in your environment and in your culture until they're actually working within it. And so with the paradigm of the gig economy and independent work, as a hiring org, you're able to essentially test drive the talent before offering them full-time employment. And then the final item is that you're able to tap into specialized skills such as project management, agile transformation, PMO advisory, PMP prep. And so there are specific skills that you may need as a hiring organization that you can tap into immediately. This next slide, I wanted to debunk some very common freelancing myths. Number one, the freelancer is the unemployable or the underemployed. And the fact is that 70% of solo businesses had annual incomes of 100 to 250K, with 30% earning greater than 250K per year. And so definitely this is not true. Number two, that freelancing is part-time only or remote only, neither of which are true. Clients seek workers who are able to work 20, 30 hours, or they seek workers who are able to come into the office sometimes. They require that a worker be physically in the office. And so in the end, it really is the requirements of the hiring org that dictate the freelancing opportunity. And so in terms of the types of opportunities available, they are varied because they are reliant upon the needs of the hiring org. And then the last one, that freelancing is only taking place in the younger generations, millennials and Gen Z. And in the graph to the right, you'll see that while millennials and Gen Z are freelancing at a higher rate, every generation is participating in the freelance economy. And I love this quote by the Harvard Business Review, where they say in the upper echelons, any stigma on temporary jobs and on the people who choose them is almost laughably dated. And I would concur with that statement. We're going to move on to a challenge question. Do you have experience working as a freelancer, independent contractor, or independent consultant? I'll give you 20 seconds. Okay, for our live audiences, when we've delivered this session, 45% on average answered yes, they do have experience versus 55%. And our audience is always project professionals. And so you'll see that while it's not an even split necessarily, those percentages are quite close to one another. Thank you so much for viewing part 2 of our 3-part session, the gig economy and project management. My name is Rebecca Medina, and I look forward to part 3, where we will be reviewing how we as project professionals can keep pace in our new world of work. Thank you so much.